The transport ship landed with a soft thud on the crystal landing pad. Taman grabbed his single bag and stepped out into the bright sunlight of Nixera Prime. The palace stretched before him like a mountain made of glass and gold. Tall spires reached toward the purple sky, and strange alien birds flew between the towers. He had been to many worlds during his military service, but nothing quite like this. Everything here screamed wealth and power. The very air seemed to shimmer with expensive technology. Guards in fancy uniforms watched him walk up the long pathway to the main entrance. Taman wore his dress uniform, the one with all his medals. He had earned every single one of them during the border wars. 3 years of fighting against rebel forces across 12 different star systems. He was proud of his service record. But now, as he walked toward the palace, he wondered why someone like him had been called here. The message had been simple. Report to Empress HFY for special assignment. Important duty. No other details. His commanding officer had looked confused when handing over the orders. Nobody got called to serve at the Imperial Palace unless they had done something very good or very bad. The palace doors opened before he could knock. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms gestured for him to enter. This was a Zentarian, one of the ruling species in the Galactic Empire. They always acted like they were better than everyone else. Human soldier Taman, the alien said in a bored voice, you are expected in the throne room. Taman followed the alien through hallways that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with artwork from 100 different worlds. Floating lights drifted overhead like tiny stars. Other aliens walked past, all dressed in expensive clothes. They looked at him with curiosity and something that might have been amusement. The throne room was huge. The ceiling was so high that Taman could barely see it. Empress HFY sat on a throne, made from what looked like a single giant crystal. She was tall and elegant, with pale green skin and silver hair that moved like it was underwater. Her eyes were the color of deep space. Approach, she said. Her voice echoed in the vast room. Taman walked forward and stopped at the proper distance. He gave his best military salute. Your Imperial Majesty. Soldier Taman reporting for duty. The Empress studied him for a long moment. There were other aliens standing around the throne. Court advisors. Probably they were all watching him like he was some kind of interesting bug. Tell me, soldier, the Empress said. What do you know about training animals? The question caught him off guard. Your Majesty. Animals, pets, creatures that need to be taught discipline and obedience. Taman thought about it. I grew up on a farm, Your Majesty. We had dogs and horses. I helped train them when I was young. Some of the court advisors made soft sounds that might have been laughter. The Empress raised one hand and they fell silent. Perfect, she said. I have a special assignment for you. A side door opened and several alien servants struggled to push something into the room. It was a large platform on wheels. And on the platform was the biggest creature Taman had ever seen. It looked like a wolf, but not quite. Its fur was thick and dark blue with silver markings. Its head was massive, with intelligent yellow eyes and teeth that could probably bite through metal. But there was something wrong with it. The creature was enormous, but not in a strong way. It was fat, really fat. Its belly dragged on the platform and it was breathing heavily just from the effort of sitting up. This is Bomb, the Empress said. He is a Vorthok. His species are supposed to be the greatest hunters in the galaxy. Fast, strong, intelligent, but as you can see, Bomb is none of these things. The creature looked at Taman with tired eyes. It seemed almost embarrassed. I have had 12 different trainers try to work with him, the Empress continued. All of them failed. Bomb shows no interest in exercise, no desire to hunt, no pride in his heritage. He prefers to eat expensive food and sleep all day. One of the court advisors stepped forward. This one was shorter than the others, with red skin and too many eyes. Your Majesty, perhaps we should simply accept that this creature is defective. Some animals cannot be fixed. The Empress looked annoyed. Kung Ho, I did not ask for your opinion. I have spent a fortune on this Vorthok. He was supposed to be a symbol of my power. Instead, he is an embarrassment. She turned back to Taman. You, human, will be his trainer. You will make him into what he should be. Strong, fast, disciplined. You will succeed where others have failed. Taman looked at the massive creature on the platform. Bomb was staring at him with what looked like resignation, like he had heard this speech many times before. Your Majesty, Taman said carefully, may I ask what happened to the previous trainers? The Empress smiled, but it was not a kind smile. They were reassigned to less pleasant duties. Some were sent to work in the crystal mines. Others found themselves guarding empty outposts on frozen worlds. The message was clear. Succeed or suffer. You will have full access to Bomb in his living quarters, the Empress said. You may use whatever methods you think best, but I expect results. Real results. If you fail, like the others, you will discover that there are many unpleasant jobs in the Empire that need doing. Taman saluted again. I understand, Your Majesty. Good Kung Ho will show you to your quarters. You begin tomorrow at dawn. As the court advisors began to file out, Taman heard them talking in low voices. They were not speaking in the common language, but their tone was clear enough. They thought this was funny. Another trainer was going to fail, and they would get to watch. One of them, a female with purple skin and jeweled scales, spoke in the common language just loud enough for him to hear. Poor human, he has no idea what he has gotten himself into. That creature is hopeless. King Ho led him through more hallways to a small room near the servant quarters. It was clean but basic. A bed, a desk, a small window that looked out at the palace gardens. Your training area is through that door, Kung Ho said, pointing to a side entrance. The creature's quarters are beyond that. I suggest you get a good night's sleep, human, you will need it. After the alien left, Taman sat on the bed and thought about what he had gotten himself into. He was a soldier, not an animal trainer. He had fought in wars, led men into battle, survived things that would have broken most people, but this felt different. This felt like a test he was supposed to fail. He looked through the door that led to the training area. In the distance, he could see the massive shape of Bomb lying on what looked like a bed made for a giant. The creature was already asleep, snoring softly. Tomorrow would be interesting. Taman woke up before dawn, just like he had every day for the past 15 years. Old military habits were hard to break. He put on his training clothes and walked through the door that connected his room to the training area. The space was huge. It looked like a gymnasium mixed with an obstacle course. There were ramps, hurdles, climbing walls, and running tracks. Everything was built much larger than human size. Previous trainers had clearly expected Bomb to use this equipment, but as Taman looked around, he could see that nothing had been used recently. Dust covered most of the surfaces. But beyond the training area was another door, this one much bigger. Taman pushed it open and stepped into what could only be described as the most luxurious pet quarters he had ever seen. The room was the size of a small house. The floor was covered with soft cushions and expensive rugs. Golden bowls filled with exotic foods sat along one wall. A water fountain bubbled in the corner, and the water looked like it had tiny jewels floating in it. The ceiling was painted to look like a sky full of stars. In the center of all this luxury, Bomb lay sleeping on a bed that was bigger than most human apartments. The Vorthok was even more impressive up close. His fur was beautiful, dark blue with silver patterns that seemed to shift in the light. His paws were huge, with claws that looked like they could cut through steel. But all of this was hidden under layers of fat. Bomb was breathing heavily even while asleep. His massive belly rose and fell with each breath. Taman could see that. The creature was not healthy. This was not how a predator was supposed to look. Good morning, Taman said softly. One yellow eye opened and looked at him. Then the other. Bomb did not seem surprised to see him there. He just looked tired. I am Taman. I am your new trainer. Bomb made a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a growl. He closed his eyes again. Tay-Min had seen this before, back on his family farm. Animals that had given up, dogs that had been yelled at too much, horses that had been broken by harsh treatment. They stopped trying because they had learned that nothing they did mattered. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, about 10 feet away from the massive creature. He did not say anything. He just sat there and waited. After a few minutes, Bomb opened his eyes again. He looked at Taman with confusion. The human was not shouting commands or waving his arms around. He was not holding any of the strange devices that previous trainers had used. He was just sitting there quietly. I brought you something, Taman said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of dried meat. It was nothing fancy, just a standard military ration that he had saved from his journey. He placed it on the floor between them and then went back to sitting quietly. Bomb sniffed the air. His nose twitched with interest. This was not like the rich foods he usually ate. This smelled simple and natural, like real meat that had been hunted and prepared by hand. Very slowly, the big creature lifted his head. It was clearly an effort. Taman could see the strain in his face, but Bomb stretched his neck forward and managed to pick up the small piece of meat with the tip of his tongue. He chewed it carefully, as if he was trying to remember something. Then he looked at Taman, with what might have been surprise. Good, Taman said. That is how meat is supposed to taste. For the next hour, they just sat there together. Taman did not try to make Bomb do anything. He did not give commands or pull out training equipment. He just talked quietly about simple things. The weather on his home planet. Stories about the dogs he had raised as a child. The difference between hunting for food and hunting for sport. Bomb listened. His ears moved slightly when Taman spoke, and his eyes stayed focused on the human's face. This was new. Previous trainers had talked at him, not to him. When Taman finally stood up to leave, Bomb lifted his head and watched him go. For just a moment, there was something different in those yellow eyes. Not quite interest, but maybe the beginning of curiosity. The next morning, Taman came back. This time, he brought a small wooden ball that he had carved from a piece of furniture in his room. He sat in the same spot and rolled the ball gently across the floor toward Bomb. The Vorthok watched the ball roll past him and come to a stop against the wall. He looked at Taman, as if to say, what am I supposed to do with that? It is a toy. Taman explained. For playing. Bomb made a sound that might have been confusion. He had never played with anything in his life. His meals came in golden bowls. His bed was made for him every day. Servants cleaned his room and brought him whatever he needed, but nobody had ever given him a simple wooden ball just for fun. Tae-min rolled the ball again. This time, when it passed close to Bomb's paw, the big creature reached out and touched it gently with one claw. The ball rolled in a different direction. Good, Taman said. You moved it. They spent an hour rolling the ball back and forth. It was not much, but it was movement, it was interaction. It was the first time in years that Bomb had done anything. That was not eating or sleeping. By the third day, Bomb was sitting up when Taman arrived. By the fourth day, he was watching the door and waiting for the human to come. By the end of the first week, he was actually moving around his room. Following the ball, when Taman rolled it, other palace staff began to notice. Servants who brought Bomb's food whispered to each other about how the creature seemed more alert. Court advisor Kung-ho stopped by to check on the progress. The creature is still fat, he said, looking at Bomb with disapproval. It is still lazy. What exactly are you accomplishing here? Human Taman was sitting on the floor, gently brushing Bomb's fur. The Vorthok was lying on his side, eyes closed, making a sound that was almost like purring. I am earning his trust, Taman said simply. King-ho snorted. Trust, it is an animal. Animals do not need trust, they need discipline. They need to be shown who is in charge. Maybe that is why the other trainers failed, Taman said quietly. The alien's eyes narrowed. Be careful, human. Disrespect toward your betters will not be tolerated. After Kyunho left, Taman continued, brushing Bomb's fur. The big creature opened one eye and looked at him. Do not worry about him, Taman said. He does not understand, but I think you do. Bomb made a soft sound and closed his eye again. For the first time since arriving at the palace, he looked peaceful. That night, Taman lay in his bed, thinking about the past week. He had not made Bomb run or jump or hunt. He had not forced him to lose weight or act fierce. All he had done was treat him like a living being instead of a broken machine. It was a start. But Taman knew that the real work was still ahead of them. Bomb was beginning to trust him, but trust alone would not be enough. Eventually, the Empress would want to see results. Real, visible changes. The question was whether Bomb still remembered how to be what he was born to be. Somewhere, under all that fat and sadness, was there still a hunter waiting to wake up? Tomorrow, Taman decided, they would find out. 3 weeks had passed since Taman began working with Bomb. The wooden ball had been joined by other simple toys, a rope, some stones arranged in patterns, even a stick that Taman had found in the palace gardens. But today was different. Today, Taman had noticed something important. Bomb was lonely. It started with small things. The way Bomb would position himself closer to the door when mealtime approached, hoping Taman would arrive early. How he would make soft whining sounds when Taman left for the day. The way his ears would droop when he was alone for too long. Tae-min sat on the floor of Bomb's quarters, watching the massive creature play with the rope toy. Well, playing was maybe too strong a word. Bomb would bat at it gently with his paw, then look at Taman as if asking for approval. You know what I think, Taman said. I think you are bored. Bomb's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. And I think you are lonely too. When was the last time you talked to another Vorthok? Bomb's expression changed. His ears flattened against his head and he looked away. There was sadness in those yellow eyes that was deeper than just being overweight and out of shape. Tae-min pulled out a small device that he had borrowed from the palace library. It was a translator unit designed to help different species communicate. He had spent hours learning how to use it. Can you understand this? He asked, switching the device. 2. What the computer said was the Vorthok language. Bomb's head snapped up so fast that Taman was startled. The big creature stared at the device with wide eyes, then looked at Taman with something that might have been hope. Taman tried again, speaking slowly into the translator. Hello, Bomb, can you hear me? The device converted his words into a series of growls, barks, and whines that sounded like a real Vorthok speaking. Bomb's reaction was immediate and powerful. He lifted his head and made a sound that was part howl, part cry. It was the sound of someone who had not heard their own language in years. Tears formed in the corners of Bomb's eyes, real tears. Taman had not known that Vorthex could cry. How long has it been? Taman asked through the translator. How long since someone spoke to you in your own language? Bomb tried to answer, but his voice was rusty from lack of use. The sounds that came out were broken and rough. But the translator managed to piece together his meaning. Since I was small, since they took me from my pack, the words hit Taman like a punch to the stomach. Bomb had been taken from his family as a child. He had been brought to this palace and treated like a pet, never allowed to speak his own language or live like his own species. No wonder he was depressed. No wonder he had given up. Tell me about your pack, Taman said gently. For the next hour, Bomb talked. His voice grew stronger as he remembered how to use it. He told Taman about running through forests with his brothers and sisters, about learning to hunt by watching the adults, about the songs his pack would sing together. Under the stars, he had been the youngest when the traders came. Vorthok pups were valuable because they could be trained to serve the wealthy. His pack had tried to protect him, but they were no match for advanced weapons and capture nets. I forgot how to be Vorthok, Bomb said sadly. I only remember how to be pet. No, Taman said firmly, you did not forget. You just buried it deep to protect yourself. But it is still there. Over the following days, Taman began incorporating Vorthok culture into their time together. He researched their hunting practices, their social structures, their ways of communicating. He learned that Vorthoks were not just predators, they were highly intelligent, with complex emotions and strong family bonds. Your people hunt in groups, Taman said one morning. They work together, using strategy and teamwork. Bomb nodded. Pack is everything. Alone, Vorthok is incomplete. That gave Taman an idea. If Bomb needed a pack, maybe Taman could be part of that pack. Not as a master or trainer, but as a hunting partner. Would you like to hunt with me? Taman asked. Bomb's eyes widened. Hunt, real hunt. Well, not exactly. But we could practice. We could pretend. Taman set up a simple game in the training area. He hid pieces of meat around the room and challenged Bomb to find them using his nose. At first, Bomb was hesitant. He was used to having food brought to him in golden bowls. The idea of searching for it seemed strange, but as his natural instincts began to wake up, something changed. His nose twitched as he caught the scent of hidden meat. His body tensed with excitement. For the first time since Taman had known him, Bomb looked alert and focused. There, Taman pointed to a spot behind some equipment. Do you smell it? Bomb moved faster than Taman had thought possible. Despite his size, he crept forward quietly, his body low to the ground. When he found the hidden meat, he looked back at Taman with pride. Good hunt, Taman said in Vorthok through the translator. Pack is proud. The word pack made Bomb's tail wag for the first time. It was just a small movement, but it was real happiness. They played the hunting game every day. Taman made it more challenging each time, hiding the meat in harder places and creating obstacles that Bomb had to navigate. Around it, the big creature began to lose weight, not from forced exercise, but from the natural movement that came with engaging his hunting instincts. More importantly, Bomb began to remember who he was. He started carrying himself differently, with more dignity. His eyes became brighter and more alert. He would greet Taman each morning with soft barks that the translator told him meant pack brother. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Kung Ho visited more frequently now, always with a disapproving expression. The creature is making noise, he complained. The other court members are disturbed by its howling. He is not howling, Taman said, he is singing. It is part of his culture. Culture. Kung Ho's multiple eyes blinked in disbelief. It is an animal. Animals do not have culture. That was the moment Taman realized the real problem. The aliens in the court did not see Bomb as a person. They saw him as a thing, a possession. The idea that he might have thoughts and feelings and a heritage of his own was completely foreign to them. Maybe that is why you could never train him, Taman said quietly. You were trying to break his spirit instead of understanding it. Kung Ho's skin flushed a darker shade of red. You forget yourself, human. You are here to make that creature obedient, not to fill its head with foolish ideas about packs and hunting. After the advisor left, Taman sat with Bomb in comfortable silence. The Vorthok seemed to understand that something important had just happened. He does not like that. I remember, Bomb said sadly. No, Taman agreed. But I do. And that is what matters. That night, as Taman lay in his bed, he could hear Bomb singing softly in the next room. It was a low, haunting melody that spoke of forests and family and freedom. It was the sound of someone finding their way back to themselves. But Taman also knew that their time was running out. The Empress would expect to see results soon. Real, visible changes that she could show off to her court. The question was whether Bomb would be ready for what was coming. 2 months had passed since Taman first met Bomb, and the changes were impossible to ignore. The massive Vorthok had lost nearly 100 pounds. His movements were smoother and more confident. His fur had regained its natural shine, and his eyes were bright with intelligence and purpose. But the most dramatic change was in how Bomb carried himself. He no longer slumped on his cushions like a defeated creature. Instead, he sat tall and alert, his head held high with natural pride. When he walked, there was grace in his movements that hinted at the deadly hunter. His species was born to be Te-Min. Watched Bomb navigate the obstacle course they had built together in the training area. What had started as simple hunting games had evolved into complex exercises that challenged both mind and body. Bomb moved through the course like flowing water, his large frame surprisingly agile as he leaped over barriers and crawled under low obstacles. Excellent, Taman said in Vorthok. Your pack ancestors would be proud. Bomb's tail wagged as he trotted back to Taman's side. The simple praise meant everything to him. For too many years he had been told he was worthless, defective, a disappointment. Now he was remembering what it felt like to be good at something. I feel strong, Bomb said through the translator. Like I could run for days without stopping. You probably could, Taman agreed. Your people are built for endurance hunting. You could chase prey across entire continents if you needed to. They had been spending hours each day learning about Vorthok history and culture. Taemin had found ancient texts in the palace library that described how Bomb's people lived in the wild. They were not just mindless predators. They were sophisticated hunters who used tools, planned complex strategies, and had rich traditions passed down through generations. The door to the training area opened, and Kung Ho entered, followed by 2 other court advisors. One was Sojin, a tall female with purple skin and jeweled scales. The other was a being Taemin had not met before, with gray skin and tentacles instead of arms. "We came to observe your progress," King Ho announced. "The Empress has been asking questions." Taemin felt a chill run down his spine. He had known this moment would come, but he had hoped for more time. "As you can see," Taemin said, gesturing to Bomb, "he has lost significant weight and gained strength and agility." Sojin walked around Bomb in a circle, examining him like he was a piece of equipment. "It is thinner." "Yes, but is it obedient? Does it follow commands?" "He is not an it," Taemin said firmly. "His name is Bomb, and he is a thinking, feeling being." The 3 aliens exchanged glances. The gray one with tentacles spoke for the first time. "You have grown too attached. Human, this creature is property of the Empress. Nothing more. Show us what it can do," King Ho demanded. "Make it perform." Taemin looked at Bomb, who was watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. The Vorthok understood enough of the common language to know what was happening. His ears were flattened against his head, and his body was tense. "Bomb is not a performer," Taemin said. "He is a hunter. His skills are not for entertainment." "Then, what good is he?" Sojin asked mockingly. "If he cannot hunt real prey, and he will not perform for guests, what is the point of all this training?" That was when Bomb surprised everyone. He stood up to his full height, which was impressive even after losing weight. His lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could tear through metal. A low growl rumbled from deep in his throat, but he was not threatening the aliens. Instead, he moved to stand beside Taemin, positioning himself protectively between his pack brother and the visitors. It was a clear message. These aliens might not respect him, but he would protect the one person who had shown him kindness. Kyung stepped backward involuntarily. "Control your beast, human. He is not my beast," Taemin said calmly. "He is my partner, and he is showing you exactly what he is capable of. Loyalty, intelligence, the ability to read a situation and respond appropriately." Sojin was staring at Bomb with new eyes. It understood our conversation. It knew we were being hostile. Of course he did. Vorthoks are highly intelligent. They have complex social structures and emotional lives. The only reason you never saw this before is because no one bothered to treat him with respect. The gray alien with tentacles made a dismissive gesture. "Intelligence in a pet is dangerous. It leads to disobedience and rebellion. Only if you treat them like slaves," Taemin replied. "Respect earns loyalty. Fear only creates resentment." After the advisors left, Bomb seemed troubled. He paced around the training area, his tail twitching with agitation. "They will try to separate us," he said through the translator. "I can smell their fear and anger." Taemin sat down on the floor and Bomb joined him, the way they had done so many times before. "Are you afraid?" Taemin asked. Bomb considered the question carefully. "Yes, but not for myself. I am afraid for you. They do not like that you treat me as equal. They see it as threat to their power." It was a remarkably insightful observation. Bomb had identified the real issue better than Taemin had. The court aliens were not just annoyed by the changes in Bomb, they were threatened by the idea that their entire system of dominance and control might be wrong. "Whatever happens," Taemin said, "I want you to know that these past months have been an honor. You are not just a great hunter. You are a good friend." Bomb pressed his massive head against Taemin's shoulder in a gesture of affection. "Pack brothers forever," he said softly. That night, Taemin could not sleep. He stood at his window, looking out at the palace gardens, when he heard unusual sounds coming from the corridors. Footsteps, whispered conversations, the soft hum of security systems being activated. Something was wrong. He pressed his ear to the door and listened carefully. In the distance, he could hear alarms beginning to sound. Not the regular palace chimes that marked the passage of time, but urgent warning signals. Taemin quickly put on his clothes and moved to the door that connected to Bomb's quarters. The Vorthok was already awake, his ears pricked up and his nose twitching as he tested the air. "Danger," Bomb said simply. Many strangers in the palace, armed, moving with purpose. Taemin's military training kicked in immediately. The palace was under attack. All of their personal problems suddenly seemed very small compared to the immediate threat of violence and death. "Can you fight?" Taemin asked. Bomb's response was to stand up and stretch, his muscles rippling under his fur. For the first time, Taemin could see him as he truly was. Not a pet or a failure, but an apex predator who had been sleeping for too long. "I remember how," Bomb said, and his voice carried a confidence that had not been there before. The real test was about to begin. The alarm sounds grew louder as Taemin and Bomb moved through the corridors toward the main palace. Emergency lights flashed red and blue, casting strange shadows on the crystal walls. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of battle energy, weapons firing, shouts of pain and anger, the crash of expensive furniture being destroyed. "Stay close," Taman whispered. "We need to find out what is happening before we act." Bomb nodded, moving beside him with surprising stealth for such a large creature. All those months of training had paid off. His movements were controlled and precise, making almost no sound despite his size. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Taman peered around the corner and saw something that made his blood run cold. Palace guards were running away from the fighting, not toward it. These were supposed to be the elite protectors of the Empress, but they were fleeing like frightened children. "Cowards," Bomb growled softly. They abandoned their pack leader. A group of figures came around the far corner, moving with military precision. They wore black combat armor and carried advanced weapons. Taman recognized the equipment. These were professional soldiers, not random criminals or protesters. The leader was a human male with cold eyes and a scarred face. He raised his hand and his team stopped. "Secure this section," he ordered. "No survivors." Taman's heart sank as he heard the voice. He knew that man, Young, a former military officer who had been court-martialed for war crimes during the border wars. He should have been in prison, but apparently someone had freed him and given him a mission. "This is bad," Taman whispered to Bomb. "These are not ordinary rebels. They are professionals." "What do they want?" Bomb asked before Taman could answer. They heard a new sound, the distinctive voice of Empress HFY crying out in pain or fear. The sound came from the direction of the throne room. "They want to kill the Empress," Taman said grimly. "This is an assassination attempt." Bomb's ears flattened against his head. Despite everything, HFY was still the closest thing to a pack leader he had known for years. The idea of her being murdered by strangers triggered deep protective instincts that he had not felt in a long time. "We must help her," Bomb said. Taman looked at his friend with concern. "Bomb, these are trained killers. They have military weapons and armor. You could be hurt or killed." Bomb's yellow eyes met his with unwavering determination. Pack brothers fight together, always. There was no time to argue. More sounds of violence were coming from the throne room, and with each passing moment, the chances of saving the Empress grew smaller. "All right," Taman said, "but we do this smart. No rushing in without a plan." They moved carefully through the palace corridors, using side passages and servant areas that Taman had learned about during his time there. Bomb's enhanced senses were invaluable. He could smell the attackers from a distance and hear their movements through the walls. "For guards ahead," Bomb whispered, his nose twitching. "2 more beyond that door." Taman nodded. He had been in situations like this before, but never with a partner like Bomb. The question was whether they could work together as effectively in real combat as they had in training. "Can you create a distraction?" Taman asked. "Something to draw their attention. While I get behind them." Bomb's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "I have idea." He moved away from Taman, circling around to approach the guards from a different angle. Then he did something unexpected. He began to howl. It was not the soft singing that Taman had heard before. This was the battle cry of a Vorthok warrior. Deep and powerful and utterly terrifying. The sound echoed through the crystal corridors, seeming to come from everywhere at once. The guards spun around in confusion, their weapons raised, but not knowing where to aim. "What was that?" One of them shouted. "Some kind of animal," another replied, "probably just a scared pet." That was their mistake. They thought they were dealing with a pet, not a predator. Bomb appeared around the corner, moving faster than something his size should have been able to move. The guards had perhaps 2 seconds to register what they were seeing before he was among them. Tay-Min had read about Vorthok combat techniques, but seeing them in person was completely different. Bomb did not just attack, he flowed through the group of guards like a deadly storm. His claws raked across armor, his teeth found gaps in their protection, and his massive weight bowled them over before they could react. In less than 30 seconds, all 4 guards were down. Not dead, but unconscious and disarmed. "Impressive," Taman said as he joined Bomb. "But try not to kill them if you can help it. They might just be following orders." Bomb nodded, though there was a wildness in his eyes that had not been there before. The battle had awakened something in him that had been sleeping for years. They continued toward the throne room, moving more quickly now. The sounds of fighting were getting closer, and Taman could hear Doyoung's voice giving orders to his men. "Bring her to the center of the room," the rebel leader was saying. "I want this broadcast across the entire empire. Everyone needs to see what happens to tyrants." Taman and Bomb reached the entrance to the throne room and peered inside. What they saw made Taman's blood boil with anger. Empress HFY was on her knees in the center of the vast room, her hands bound behind her back. Her elegant robes were torn and stained with blood. Doyoung stood over her with a weapon pointed at her head, while his soldiers set up recording equipment. But what made Taman angriest was the sight of Kyungho and Sojin standing off to one side, watching calmly. They were not prisoners, they were collaborators. They had betrayed their own empress. You see, Young said to the recording device. Your mighty empress is just another weak alien who hides behind wealth and power. But power built on oppression cannot last forever. Taemin counted the enemies in the room. 8 soldiers, plus Young, plus the 2 traitor advisors. The odds were not good, but they had advantages that the rebels did not know about. Ready? He whispered to Bomb. That Vorthak's response was a low growl that promised violence. Pakbra, fight together. Taemin took a deep breath and stepped into the throne room. Hello, Young, still making speeches to empty rooms. I see. The rebel leader spun around, his weapon swinging, toward Taemin. Well, if it is not the perfect little soldier, come to die for your alien masters. Actually, Taemin said, I came to stop you from making a very big mistake. Young laughed. You and what army? That was when Bomb stepped out of the shadows behind him. The Vorthak had grown larger and more powerful over the past months, but in the dim light of the throne room, he looked absolutely massive. His eyes glowed yellow in the darkness, and his teeth gleamed like white daggers. Several of the soldiers took involuntary steps backward. Sojin made a small sound of fear. Meet my pack brother, Taemin said calmly. I think you two are going to get along just fine. The throne room fell silent except for the soft hum of recording equipment and the heavy breathing of frightened soldiers. Young kept his weapon trained on Taemin, but his eyes kept darting to Bomb, who stood perfectly still in the shadows, like a statue carved from nightmares. Kill them both, Young ordered his men. But the soldiers hesitated. They had signed up to fight palace guards and soft aliens, not whatever that massive creature was. In the dim light, Bomb looked even larger than his actual size, and the way he held himself perfectly motionless was more terrifying than if he had been snarling and pacing. What are you waiting for? Young shouted. It is just an animal. That was the moment Taemin had been waiting for. While the rebels were focused on Bomb, he moved. Years of military training took over as he rolled behind one of the large crystal pillars that supported the throne room ceiling. The soldiers opened fire, but their energy beams hit empty air where Taemin had been standing. The mist shots struck the crystal walls, sending rainbow fragments scattering across the floor. At the same time, Bomb exploded into motion. But he did not charge straight at the soldiers like they expected. Instead, he leaped up onto one of the raised platforms that decorated the room, then bounded from platform to platform, using the throne room's elaborate architecture to stay out of their line of fire. Track the animal, Young screamed. Do not let it get behind you. But Bomb was already behind them. He dropped from a high platform onto 2 soldiers who were trying to corner Taemin. His landing was perfectly controlled, heavy enough to knock them unconscious, but not hard enough to kill them. Te-Min emerged from behind his pillar and tackled a 3rd soldier, using hand-to-hand combat techniques to disarm him quickly. The rebels' weapons skittered across the crystal floor. Work together, Young ordered his remaining men. Form a defensive circle. It was good military thinking, but it showed that Young did not understand what he was fighting. Taemin and Bomb were not just 2 separate opponents. They were a team that had been training together for months. Bomb created chaos by charging at the defensive circle from one side, forcing the soldiers to turn and fire at him. While they were distracted, Taemin attacked from the opposite direction. When the soldiers tried to split their attention between both threats, they became vulnerable to attacks from unexpected angles. The crystal throne room became a maze of rainbow reflections as energy beams bounced off the polished surfaces. But Taemin and Bomb used this to their advantage, appearing and disappearing like ghosts in the shifting light. This is impossible, one of the soldiers shouted as Bomb seemed to vanish into thin air, only to reappear behind him a moment later. They are just one human and one animal, Young snarled. Kill them. But his men were losing confidence with every passing second. 3 more soldiers went down, disarmed and unconscious but not seriously injured. Taemin was careful to use only enough force to stop them, not to kill them. Bomb was equally controlled in his attacks. Despite the wildness that Taemin had seen in his eyes earlier, the Vorthak remembered his training. He was a hunter, not a berserker. Every move was calculated and precise. Kyung-ho and Sojin tried to flee during the confusion, but Bomb cut off their escape route with a leap that carried him halfway across the room. The 2 traitor advisors found themselves trapped between the Vorthak and the Wa. Please, Sojin whimpered. We were forced to help them. We had no choice. Bomb looked at her with disgust but did not attack. Instead, he kept them pinned in the place while the battle continued around them. Soon, only Young and 2 soldiers remained standing. The rebel leader's face was twisted with rage and disbelief. This is not possible. You are just one human with a pet. That is where you are wrong, Taemin said, breathing hard but still steady. I am not fighting with a pet. I am fighting with a partner. To prove his point, Taemin gestured with his hand, a signal that he and Bomb had practiced many times. During their training sessions, Bomb immediately understood and moved to flank the remaining soldiers from the left, while Taemin approached from the right. The coordination was perfect. They moved like they were reading each other's minds, each one knowing exactly where the other would be at any moment. When one soldier tried to shoot Taman, Bomb was there to knock the weapon aside. When another tried to circle behind Bomb, Taman intercepted him. Impossible, Du Young muttered. Humans and aliens cannot work together like this. It goes against nature. No, Taman said, as he and Bomb closed in on the last rebels. Cruelty and dominance go against nature. Respect and partnership are what make us strong. The final two soldiers surrendered without a fight, laying down their weapons and raising their hands. They had seen enough to know that continuing to fight would only result in their own defeat. Du Young stood alone in the center of the throne room, his weapon still pointed at Empress HFY, who had watched the entire battle with wide eyes. "Stay back," he shouted. "I will kill her if you come any closer." But his hand was shaking, and his voice had lost its earlier confidence. The professional soldier who had entered the palace with such certainty was gone, replaced by a desperate man who could not understand how his perfect plan had fallen apart. "You do not want to do that," Timon said calmly, taking a step forward. "Your revolution is over. Killing her now will not change anything. It will send a message," Du Young insisted. "It will show the galaxy that tyrants can be brought down." "The only message it will send," Bomb said, using the translator so everyone could understand him, "is that you are a coward who kills helpless prisoners." Du Young's eyes widened in shock. "It talked, the Animo talked." "I am not animal," Bomb said with dignity. "I am Vorthok, I am hunter, I am pack brother to human who treats me with honor." The rebel leader's weapon wavered as he tried to process what he was hearing. In that moment of distraction, Taman struck. He dove forward, tackling Du Young and knocking the weapon from his hands. The battle was over. As palace security finally arrived, too late to help but in time to arrest the rebels, Taman helped Empress HFY to her feet. She was shaken, but unhurt, and she looked at both him and Bomb with something that might have been respect. "You saved my life," she said softly, "both of you." Bomb bowed his head in the traditional Vorthok gesture of acknowledgement. "Pack protects pack," he said simply, but Taman could see in the Empress's eyes that something fundamental had changed. She was looking at Bomb, not as a pet or a possession, but as a person who had chosen to risk his life for her. The real transformation was just beginning. 3 days after the attack, the throne room had been cleaned and repaired. The crystal walls sparkled like new, and expensive furniture had been replaced. But something more important than the decoration had changed. The atmosphere itself felt different. Empress HFY sat on her crystal throne, but she was not alone. For the first time in the palace's history, chairs had been placed beside the throne for guests of honor. Timon sat in one of them, wearing his dress uniform with its many medals. In the other sat Bomb, no longer the overweight and depressed creature who had arrived months earlier, but a proud Vorthok warrior in his full glory. The court had gathered to witness something unprecedented. Word had spread throughout the palace about what had happened during the attack. The human soldier and the Empress's pet had not only saved her life, but had done so by working together as equals. "Citizens of the court," Empress HFY began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast room. "We are here to recognize acts of extraordinary courage and loyalty." The assembled aliens murmured among themselves. Many of them looked uncomfortable. They were used to ceremonies where the Empress rewarded other nobles or praised successful military campaigns. This was something entirely different. 3 nights ago, rebels entered our palace with the intention of ending our life. The Empress continued. "Our guards fled. Our security systems failed. Those we trusted most betrayed us." Her eyes found Kyungho and Sojin, who stood in chains among the other captured rebels. "In our darkest hour, only 2 beings in this entire palace chose to risk their lives to protect us." She stood and walked down from her throne to stand between Timon and Bomb. "Soldier, Timon, you could have fled like the others. You could have saved yourself and left us to our fate. Instead, you chose to fight against impossible odds." Timon started to speak, but the Empress raised her hand for silence. "But what is even more remarkable is how you fought. You did not fight alone. You fought alongside a partner you had trained, not through force or fear, but through respect and understanding." She turned to Bomb, and when she spoke, her voice carried a tone that none of the court had ever heard before. "Humility. Bomb of the Vorthok people, I owe you an apology that is years overdue. I took you from your family when you were young. I treated you like a possession instead of a person. I never bothered to learn your language or understand your culture. I failed you in every way that mattered." Bomb lifted his great head and looked at her with those intelligent yellow eyes. When he spoke through the translator, his voice was gentle, but firm. "You did not know better then. But you know better now. That is what matters." The Empress nodded, tears forming in her eyes. In Vorthok culture, what is the bond called when one chooses another as family? Not by blood, but by choice. Bomb's ears perked up in surprise. She had been studying his people's customs. "Pack bond," he said. "Sacred connection that cannot be broken." "Then I asked the court to witness this truth," the Empress said, raising her voice so everyone could. "Here Timon and Bomb are pacting. They are family by choice, not master and pet. They are partners, not owner and property." The murmurs from the court grew louder. This was revolutionary thinking. If the Empress's own pet was actually a person with rights and freedoms, what did that mean for how they treated other beings? Furthermore, the Empress continued, we are promoting Timon to the rank of Palace Security Chief, with full authority over all defensive operations. She turned to Bomb, and we offer you, Bomb of the Vortex, complete freedom to choose your own path. You may remain here as an honored guest, or you may leave to find your own people, or you may choose any other life you wish. The choice is yours alone. The throne room fell completely silent. Everyone waited to see what the Vorthok would decide. Bomb stood up to his full height and looked around the room at all the aliens, who had once viewed him as nothing more than a failed experiment. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. I choose to stay with my pack brother, he said, but not as pet or prisoner. I stay as partner and friend. The Empress smiled a real smile, not the cold expression she usually wore in court. Then, it is settled. Chief Timon and his partner Bomb will be responsible for palace security. She walked back to her throne, but before sitting down, she had one more announcement. There is something else. Word of what happened here has spread to other worlds. We have received requests from 7 different planets asking for human trainers to work with their own Vorthok populations. Timon looked surprised. Your Majesty, it seems that your methods treating beings with respect instead of dominance are of great interest throughout the galaxy. We are establishing a new program. Humans and Vortex working together as teams. Trainers and partners, not masters and slaves. She sat down on her throne and looked out at the assembled court. This is the future, not ruled through fear and force, but cooperation between species. Understanding instead of dominance. Respect instead of oppression. Not everyone in the court looked happy about this announcement. Change was never easy, especially for those who benefited from the old ways. But none of them dared to argue with the Empress who had just survived an assassination attempt thanks to the very partnership she was now promoting. After the ceremony, Timon and Bomb walked together through the palace gardens. The alien birds sang in the trees overhead, and the crystal fountains sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. Are you sure about your choice? Timon asked. You could leave here, find other Vorthoks, live wild and free, like your ancestors. Bomb considered the question seriously before answering. My ancestors lived in packs. Pack is family. Pack is everything. You are my pack now, pack brother. Where you go, I go. They sat down beside one of the fountains, just as they had done so many times during their training sessions. But now they sat as equals, as partners, as friends. So what happens next? Timon asked. Bomb's tail wagged slightly. Next, we teach others what we learned. That strength comes not from ruling over others, but from standing beside them. That different species can be more than master and slave, they can be family. In the distance, they could see other palace staff watching them with curiosity. Some looked afraid, some looked confused, but others looked interested. Change was coming to the Galactic Empire, one conversation at a time. Pack brothers forever, Timon asked, extending his hand. Bomb pressed his massive paw against Timon's palm. Pack brothers forever. As the suns of Nexura Prime began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, a human soldier and a Vorthok warrior sat together in comfortable silence. They had found something rare in the galaxy, true friendship that crossed the boundaries of species and culture, and across the stars. Other worlds were beginning to learn that the greatest strength came not from conquest, but from connection. Not from fear, but from respect. Not from dominance, but from the simple act of treating others with dignity and understanding. The revolution had begun with one fat alien wolf and one patient human soldier. But it would end with a galaxy transformed by the power of genuine partnership between species who had once seen each other as master and slave, but now saw each other as family.